Thank you very much. So yes, I'm going to talk today about opening habitat for migratory fish and tell a little bit of some of the problems that we have in the Forth and some of the ways that we're trying to address them. So the first slide here is a reworking of data for the Forth district, showing the 13 river catchments that we manage. And we've used the SEPA data for barriers which are causing problems to fish migration, mainly from a salmon perspective, but also from eels and lamprey, and try to rework it in a sort of a traffic light system to actually show which habitat is actually lost to fish, as opposed to just looking at the barriers themselves. And one of the reasons for doing this is, although this sort of identifies the problem, it also demonstrates the lost opportunity for our migratory fish coming into the Forth, further Forth and the Forth estuary and the river systems. So obviously our key, what we would like to do as part of our work is have all these areas open. Now some people will look at this and say, we're not taking into account any natural barriers in this, and we acknowledge that, but it's really just to indicate really the loss of habitat and areas where fish could get to. And obviously this loss isn't just for fish, it's a lost opportunity. It's a lost opportunity for the area from a social and economic point of view, as well as from an environmental point of view. But it's not a small job in the Forth, looking at these barriers. Here's 3 examples on the South Esk, the North Esk and the Avon. And, you know, none of these barriers are in any kind of economic use, and they're on a list of priority from SEPA to look at through the Water Environment Fund. Now, the problem with some of these barriers is it's not just a small job, but it's also the fact that none of these barriers are actually licensed. And across the whole of the Forth district, we have approximately between 60 and 70 barriers of this size which don't have a car license. And the reason why that creates difficulties for us is that the person who is responsible for fish passage, and any barrier that's over 1 metre high should have a car licence, isn't actually aware that they have a responsibility to undertake any improvements. And these barriers are absolutely stopping fish getting anywhere near into our catchments. It's not just that they're large, but some of them are right on the tidal limit of our rivers. Here, 3 big impactors: the Nowes Weir on the Tyne, Belhaven Weir on the Beal, and actually one which is an operational barrier, which is also not licensed, the dock gates at the Port of Leith. So no fish are getting past really any of these barriers. We might get 1 or 2 a year, but they're blocking all species of fish into our river systems. When fish are held up at these barriers, it's not just that they can't move upstream, they suddenly become vulnerable to other exploitation. And in the Forth, saw the statistics earlier on about the number of incidents that occurred last year in terms of wildlife crime, and a large number of them were in the Forth. And here we've got set lines being extracted from the ests, and also nets taken from the Tyne. And we've already seen this picture once today. And this obviously is the haul of fish that were taken out of the Tyne some years ago, and a huge number of sea trout at that particular time. So part of the dialogue that we want to have with owners and also with SEPA as a regulator is it's not just a problem for the owner, and it's not just a problem in terms of fish population, but these sites where we've got these barriers are also causing a hotspot for crime, not just wildlife crime, but also the crime that goes alongside it. And these barriers have become difficult for anglers to fish because of antisocial behaviour from criminals trying to exploit the situation. In addition to the problem of distribution, there are also problems in how these barriers are impacting on our fish populations. This is electrofishing on the Midlothian S system, and you can see there quite clearly that salmon are not going very far up the system. The small crosses on there are all the barriers that are on there. But if we extrapolate this information and getting the this slide to move over. You can see here, if we extrapolate the populations from the teeth system, which has a very similar habitat constituent to the esps, that we would expect to see a population increase of quite a huge amount if the barriers were removed. So when we're looking at barriers, we really want to see what is the impact on a fish population, and not just is it got a fish pass or whatever impact that it might have in terms of getting sort of more fish into a river. We also have a problem with barriers in the sense of the resilience of our rivers. This is a mine water discharge, and it is also happening on the Midlothian-esque situation. And these are problems across a lot of our areas where mining has occurred in the past. And the groundwater is now not being pumped out, and we're getting overflows into our rivers at quite a huge extent. In this particular case, it turned the river completely red. This also happened last year at low flows, and there was no ability for the water to flush out, and we had a complete loss of all fish within a section of river. Now, this issue would not have been so dramatic or had such an impact if it wasn't for the fact that just upstream is yet another barrier at Dalkeith. So the fish, because the fish cannot extend up through the river systems, they become more vulnerable to any incidents that occur. So what can be done? Of course, we don't want to just look at the negatives of this, and we have been working on the River Almond for many years, trying to fix some of these issues. And here we have the fish pass at Fair Far, which was put in 2017, fish pass at Kirkton Weir, which was also put in 2017, two nature-based solutions, the rock ramp at Howden Weir and the bypass channel at Rugby Club, done in 2019. And early yesterday, this is water, this is the fish pass at Limefield Falls, just waiting for the water to go down into it. So all these fish passes were all paid for from the Water Environment Fund and as part of the River Life project that we've been running with West Lothian Council and the City of Edinburgh Council. But we're not the only people who've actually put in fish passes throughout the last round of river basement management plans. A number of others have been put in, but there is a bit of a but with some of these. These have all been licensed in the last few years. The top one here is a fish pass at Knockbeneker, a small fish pass on the Dollarburn and the Devon catchment, a fish pass at Bankerton Weir, and a refurbished fish pass on Inveresk Weir. The problem with all these fish passes is they don't actually work. And although there's a licence on the impoundments to say that these fish passes should be there, the licence conditions don't actually require any of the owners of any of these parts of infrastructure to undertake any monitoring that actually shows what the beneficial impact on fish populations might be. So we have a bit of an ask, and it is an ask of SEPA, but it's also for consideration in the wild salmon strategy. We would like to see a much more consistent approach. We find that some weirs are licensed, some weirs are not. Some weirs have fish pass requirements, some do not. And we really would ask SEPA to put a more consistent approach, not just for our benefit, but for the owners of these weirs to know what they want to do. We'd also really want to see some monitoring of effectiveness. We seem to be in a situation where if there's a fish pass, it's got a tick in the box, and everybody's patting on themselves on the back and saying that the job's done. But the reality is we don't know what the actual effect of this work is on fish populations. We also want to see clearer articulation of responsibility for passage, for clearing of fish passes, and also for maintenance. Often owners do not know what the responsibility is that they have for the infrastructure that they manage. We'd also ask for some clear guidance on requirements. The EA manual, which is what's referred to for fish passage, doesn't actually include Scottish regulatory requirements at the moment, and we would ask that SEPA updates that so that it's in the context of our legislation. SEPA had 45 fish passes or fish easement projects to undertake in river basement management 2. We've actually done, I think, about 10. So even though we're very grateful for the amount of money that's been put forward by Scottish Government to the Water Environment Fund, we do believe that there needs to be more flexible use of this funding to improve the effective delivery of these improvements across the catchments. And we'd like a much more constructive dialogue on the implications of current compounded problems, that lack of resilience in our rivers, but also the problems of poaching and areas where fish become vulnerable to exploitation. And we'd really, really wish for, in River Basement Management 3, for a proactive liaison with the District Salmon Fishery Boards on prioritisation and management. Thank you very much for listening.